Hello, everyone. My name is Pam Blackamore. We are the Washington Toe Foundation, and our program is entitled To Table It Program. The title of this segment is, What Does North Minneapolis Mean to You? We have asked a group of people, residents of North Minneapolis, to join us because we'd like to talk to you today about the positives and negatives of North Minneapolis and where we go from here. We will be moving on to a much more comprehensive program, but this is the beginning of what does North Minneapolis mean to you. Starting from the left, I'd like to ask each member to introduce yourselves and talk to us about living in North Minneapolis and what life has been like for you in North Minneapolis. So if you will begin.
Okay, my name is Terrence Gordon. I've been over north for 53 right now, so man, I must have been over north about a good 50 years. A good 50 years, maybe a little bit less. It definitely has changed because it's not nowhere the same one from when we got here in Minnesota with my parents from Mississippi. But I definitely like the north side compared to any other parts of the town or the city. I like this vibrantness. You know, there's a lot going on. It's not too fast, but it's not too slow. So, yeah.
Very good. Does your family still live in North Minneapolis?
Yeah.
You've raised your children in North
I
Minneapolis.
raised my children. We're still there.
How did they like living in North Minneapolis?
My daughter probably could be in a quieter area. She probably like that. My son probably likes where he is.
Okay,
If he didn't live over north, he'd probably still hang over there.
very good. Next.
Hello, my name is Ryan, and I did not grow up in North Minneapolis, but I lived in North Minneapolis for a number of years. And when I first was introduced to North Minneapolis, it was a little scary for me. But then I'd grown into meeting new people, and it felt more like a community. I have gotten into trouble in North Minneapolis myself, and I have done good in North Minneapolis as well. It is a very tight-knit group of people, especially if you've grown up there. You have family, you have ties that root you in North Minneapolis. And my time when I was there, I became part of that family, knowing your neighbors, knowing the people down the street, knowing convenience store owners, being able to walk in there and just hold a conversation for 15, 20 minutes, get your food and go. It felt like a family after a number of years of being in North Minneapolis.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Stacy. I, too, did not grow up in North Minneapolis. I'm a transplant. I've been over here now 30 years? Ooh, 30 years I've been over in North Minneapolis, 30 years. And I can't say anything bad. I've had nothing bad. I enjoy it. I love being over in North Minneapolis. I love being around my own people. I like the community. I like the fact that no matter where I go, it's a smiling face. I can always strike up a conversation. It's someone to talk to. There's always something going on. Yes, there's crime and there's violence and there's all this stuff, but it doesn't affect your quality of life. Life is good. I don't have any problems. I know all of my neighbors. We talk all the time. We look out for one another. All the community kids, they all know me at the corner store. I talk to everybody. I feel at home. I do. I really feel at home. So.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Ron Shepard, and like everyone else has said, I've been in North Minneapolis since 1968 of May, so it's going on 54 years. And I've never lived nowhere else since I moved here from Missouri, So, but it's just, to me, it's home. I feel comfortable there. And like Stacy said, I know my neighbors. They know me. I bought my house in 1975, and I've been there ever since. I live on Oliver Avenue North. And like you say, I know the neighbors. We've had people move in and out, and most of my neighbors is homeowners, so we don't have a lot of rental properties. Here lately, we've had a couple, and they've moved out, because us as neighbor, we keep our homes together, and we report, find out who the landlord is, and we kind of report to the city, so they kind of what they call slumlords, a couple of them. But no, I love North Minneapolis. I've been going to church there. I go to church on Elwood, and like I say, it's just home. So.
Thank you. It's a wonderful thing hearing people, residents, talk about North Minneapolis and the positive that they see. We need, in doing our program, the Washington Toe Foundation, we want to make sure that the residents are inclusive. We need to have their lens so that we can see where our focus needs to be. We want people to feel like their voices are valued and heard. Many residents, like yourselves, haven't had an opportunity to talk about their lives, and that's what we want to do. As we move forward with this program, we're going to come out into the community. And if you are still interested, we will come to where you are, because we want to get footage of your area and tell us, what do you think? And I'd like you to speak about that for a minute. What changes do you see are necessary for where you live? Or in the case of like with Ryan, and you've driven to North Minneapolis, you've visited your sister in North Minneapolis. What do you observe that could be brought to the attention of city council members? And I'm going to ask you that first.
This is something I have thought about, and I believe it was a practice long ago of I'm going to go from the lens of protection, police, security, having police officers actually walking the neighborhood, having them be a part of the society there, not just driving through, looking through a glass and thinking that they see something, but actually getting out and saying, hey, so-and-so's name, I know your mother, go home.
Right.
Being more interactive with the community. Education of the law, going to the residents now of North Minneapolis, having education of the law, knowing their rights.
Exactly.
Being able to call each other out without feeling like they are doing harm. Being able to, what's the old saying? It takes a village to raise a child.
Correct.
That's what I feel that needs to come back. That small town in a big city feel.
Terry, you've talked about how you've lived in North Minneapolis 50 plus years. I'd like you to pick a decade that is most memorable for you.
Man, it's got to be my teen years.
Okay.
Somewhere either that, it's a toss up between my teens and 20s, and
Why?
I mean that's my best years or something. I'd probably say my 20s were my best years. Of course,
Okay.
I was an young adult, and being able to enjoy myself the way I wanted to, But I can't say my teens were that bad or horrible or anything. Things were definitely different at that time. If you want to talk about like crime, I mean, you definitely knew not to be disrespectful to the police.
Sure.
Or even break laws, for those who do or not. I mean, I know most people know not to, but they do, right? But now, if you compare, you contrast that with today, it's like There's no sense of respect for law and order. I don't know. I couldn't pinpoint, if I had to put a number on, I couldn't pinpoint who was worse, the police or the people nowadays, but it's got to start somewhere.
Right.
And the way they're doing it today ain't working. I mean, I knew that wasn't going to work when they tried it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't talk bad people out of being bad people. You know, most of them, you know, you have to punish them. That's why when you raise your children, you teach them right from wrong. When they do wrong, you punish them.
Sure.
And as they grow older, they learn how to act.
I hear from, you hear a lot of young folks that say, I'm not getting respect. I don't feel respected. Unfortunately, they really don't know what the word means because
Right.
they don't respect others
Or themselves.
Yeah.
or themselves. They have, the value
Right.
of life changes.
Mm-hmm.
But Ron, back to you. I'd like you to pick a decade in the years that you've lived in Minneapolis. What stands out? What decade stands out for you that was most or is most memorable?
I guess I would say back in the 80s.
Okay.
And that's when, well, I moved here in 68. Then I got married in 72. Then that's when my wife and I got married and we raised our family. And it seemed like that was a good year. You know, we both had good jobs. And like you say, people respected each other back then.
Mhm.
So I think it was the 80s
Okay.
for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stacy, same question.
I'm a transplant here, so I didn't get into North Minneapolis until the 90s. And so I can't say I've had the best years. I would say it would have to be probably the 2000s.
Okay.
The 2010, from 2005 to 2000, I'd say to 2000, up through there. I would say those are probably some of the best years for me in North Minneapolis.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've lived in North Minneapolis off and on a long time, and I was here when, in the 60s, when the disturbance took place, 66, 67. As a matter of fact, 66, I lived on 13th and Newton.
Mm-hmm.
So when the disturbance took place, I could just walk down to the corner and see everything that was happening. And it started, if my memory serves me correctly, around North Commons. Folks went south and then headed west. I remember the National Guard being put in place on Penn and Plymouth. The mayor stopped anybody from going west. They had National Guard positioned on top of the precinct station when it was located on West Broadway. I remember very clearly, if you were driving down 55 westbound, you got stopped at Theodore Wirth Parkway. Golden Valley Police challenged you as to why, what was your business? And they turned you around. You couldn't go west.
Was that because you were black, though? or-
That is correct.
Okay.
So I remember, there are various times, the thing that I liked about North Minneapolis, they always referred to it as Minneapolis as a whole, as a big country town. In 74, the average homicide rate was 19. And I recall you could walk up and down the streets. You could walk down Plymouth Avenue without fear of someone shooting at you. People did a lot of fist fighting, but you didn't see or you didn't hear the shots fired. I'd like to ask you this question as you represent the community. Have you ever been asked by anyone who doesn't live north why you live north? And I'd like to know your answer. Terry?
I haven't never been asked why I live north. I have asked how could you be there? You know what I mean?
Yes.
And the best way I can sum it up to people who don't live in Minneapolis is that you ain't never been in the city. with a high crime rate. North Minneapolis ain't that city.
That's right.
Now, we got small pockets of people. A lot of times it's people coming outside of the city come in North Minneapolis,
Correct.
hang in North Minneapolis.
Correct.
Especially nowadays. Back in the days, maybe not so much when I was growing up, but it wasn't guns weren't a thing, you know. You didn't think you needed a gun growing up in North Minneapolis then. You know, as long as you got two hands, you're okay.
Yes.
And a couple friends sometimes.
That's right.
And nowadays you see them same people and y'all can laugh at each other, but now, you know, it's not the same. But people who don't live over north don't understand, you know. And if they can't come over north, then when you travel out of town, you ain't going to the other cities and those other spots to know the difference. So they have no contrast. All they know is what they see on the news.
Correct.
You know, and that's okay. If you don't want to hang in North Minneapolis because you're scared, then stay away. You know, it ain't. I mean, like I said, it can be bad if you're doing wrong.
Right.
And
Right.
anybody can be in the wrong spot at the wrong time.
Yes.
Correct.
And if you watch any of the current news these days, a lot of these people are leaving the north side and committing their crimes in the suburbs. So, with that being said, I don't feel so bad over here.
That's correct.
You know, but I do know that problem needs to be addressed as far
Correct.
as crime goes. But those people, they don't bother me at all.
I find it interesting when you're talking about that, when folks that don't live in Minneapolis and they express a surprise when they say these kinds of things don't happen in our community. Well, you know, we're a pretty mobile society.
Right.
People want to commit a crime, they know how to jump in the car and go, just like they'll drive to North Minneapolis. They can drive to St. Paul, or they can drive to a small suburb, whatever. The crime goes where the offender is. But I'd like to talk for a minute about the school system. You've raised your children in North Minneapolis.
Yes.
Stacy's raised her kids. Terry's raised his, and Ryan, of course, has his niece and nephew. And I'd like for you to, talk a little bit about how you feel about the school system. I'd like to hear from you about the school resource officers that they used to have implanted in the schools to address the violence until people complained and said the officers were mistreating their kids, and then they took the officers out, but the violence has continued.
I got a lot to say about
So
that.
I'd like to hear from you about those things, as well as how your kids felt or feel. I know when I went to school in North Minneapolis, there was no issue. And of course, if there was any type of control, it was from my mother, who always used to tell us that don't have anybody from school calling me about your behavior. I was so afraid of my mother, I was definitely not going to get in trouble at school.
Right.
But that's me, but I'd like to hear from you, and I want to start with Ron first and talk a little bit about public schools and how your children, how they fared in the school.
You know, like I said, I have 3 children, and all of them went to North High School and graduated. And for as, you know, I was there to make sure they were doing what they were supposed to do. Lots of times, you as a parent, we complain about the school, but you got to be involved in your children's activity.
Correct.
Only thing with my children, they didn't like it because I could drive in the parking lot. Before I get to the principal's office, they was meeting me in the hallway because, Dad, I didn't do this. I said, no, I didn't say you did anything. I'm just coming to check.
Yes.
You know, and they didn't like that, but somebody told them, your dad's here, your mom's here. You know, they knew my car.
Yeah.
So they when I drive up, they knew I was there.
Yes.
But I had no problem when my children was going to North High School, and they started at the school down on Lincoln Junior High. They went there. So my children had a good education, you know. And lots of time, like I said, us as parents, we have to be there to support the children and follow up with them, and not just send them to school. Go check on your children
That
at
is
the
correct.
school.
Yes.
And that's what my wife and we did. So
And what is your view about the school resource officers? Do you think it's a good thing, a bad thing?
No, I think it's a good thing.
Okay,
Yes, I really do. And like you say, when my children went to school, they had hall monitors
Yes.
type of thing.
yes.
And my children respected them because they knew me, and they knew if the hall monitor was going to call, there was going to be trouble. But I
Yes.
never got a call from the hall monitors.
Of course.
So
They didn't bribe them or anything.
no, not at all, not at all. Yeah, but no.
Just a
no.
little light humor.
Yeah.
Stacy,
My experience with this Minneapolis school system is truly something else. We started at Lucy Laney with my son in kindergarten, and I told them he's busy. And he was already reading at 3, 4 years old, so he was ready to go. So I told them then he was busy, and to give him something to do, keep this little boy busy. Instead, they come back and tell me he needs to be tested, there's something wrong with him. There's nothing wrong with my child, you're not doing your job. He's probably more advanced, he probably should be in 1st grade. So we left there, and we tried out numerous schools. We ended up over at KIPP, which was a charter school in Brooklyn Center. He got there at 3rd, 4th grade. He ran it till 9th grade. There, I was more satisfied with the curriculum. I was definitely satisfied with, my son said it was too much control. I thought it was, I call it structure. What I did not like was that fact that the teachers, once again, were trying to tell my son, you're not asking the correct questions, you're asking questions that are above where your classmates are. They would almost want to punish him for knowing more than what everybody else did, and because we're now 12 and 13 years old, what are the little boys at that age doing? If someone passes gas, guess what? Half the class fell on the floor laughing, and so if they have nothing to do, guess what they're doing? So I, once again, I'm telling them, give my son something to do. We got to high school, finally a challenge. We're at Henry. They had an engineering program. I was ecstatic. Finally something to challenge this boy. He ran right through it, did the IBC and all that, ran right through it, but it was more of a challenge for him. I did not have the same results. I did not have the same teachers calling me always up at the school, because I was at KIPP so much that they were trying to offer me a job because they were constantly calling me. And so I'm constantly up there. With my daughter, I found the same thing. We were over at Loring, and I was constantly up there, and they were trying to say it was behavior, and I'm thinking, I know my daughter, this is anything but behavior, it's not that. And I'm finding repetition, and what it is these teachers that I had the problem with, they did not look like me and you.
Right.
These are the teachers that are coming into the inner city, working in the inner city, teaching these students so that they can get their student loans reduction or get their student loans taken off. They come and teach in the inner city 5 years, we take off half your student loan. Well, little Susie and little Johnny, when they're coming to the inner city school, they don't know about Tyrone. They don't know about Keisha. Because Tyrone and Keisha, you're not going to just sit and tell them, come on, I need you to sit down. No, you're going to tell them, sit your behind down. That's what it is. And so there's a lot of disruption in the class because they don't know how to control and take that authority in the class with these kids. And remember, this is a group of kids that, these are the kids whose, their grandparents or their mothers or great aunts is the crackheads of the 80s, and their parents are just, you see what I'm saying? So you have to think about who this line of kids that we're dealing with. The majority of these kids come off of drug-infested, not all, please don't misconstrue what I'm saying all, but we have a segment in there that come off of this, and they're coming from these homes where everything is not as balanced as we would like it to be in society. So we have different behavior problems, and then these teachers who don't know anything about us, they're out of Eden Prairie or St. Cloud or Madison. They know nothing about what's going on in the inner city and how to talk to and how to deal with our kids. So one, they're not able to educate them. Two, they're not able to keep control of the classroom, and now they're discouraged. So now they're just passing them along. Don't take the test. Just I'll give you the grade. Well, what are you saying for my child? And so I found that a lot, where I had to go back in and let them know, you're not going to pass my child along, and I would have to go and sometimes help them get control of the class, is what I'm saying. And so I do see that as a problem, and everybody is not able to go to the school and have the time as I did to do that. And that is a real problem in our schools today.
Very good, thank you. I'm going to skip to Terry and ask that same question
Okay,
about the
well,
school system and your kids' experience going through Minneapolis public schools.
man, it's a major challenge. I know my kids are very strong-headed. think they know it all, of course, you know, how kids, teens, especially teenagers. My daughter did graduate outside of Minneapolis. She actually went to KIP too.
Mhm.
She got the 4-year scholarships to Benil, St. Margaret, which is another thing of itself. Good school, but other
Challenges
issues.
the challenges that were
issues,
there,
yeah.
you weren't quite ready for some of them because you were like, for real, this is what we're dealing with in here, all this money, and we still got the same problems I just left.
Okay.
Slightly different, not
Terry.
the same problem as what you had there. It's another, down another avenue.
Oh, okay.
You know, off topic right now, but a good school nevertheless. I
Mm.
like the curriculum, the program. But my son went to Minneapolis school. He's at Henry right now. And the problem I have with Minneapolis public schools, especially high school, is that it seems like in our black neighborhoods, in our black community schools, they tinker with the curriculum so much that you don't get a real education. They think we're gonna change this and we're gonna do it this way instead of that way. Last I known that math is math.
Mhm.
When you read, you learn how to read. There's rules to reading. It doesn't change. Punctuations don't change. The meanings to those don't change. So how creative do you have to be to teach a course? Now, the teacher may need to be creative, but the curriculum itself does not have to change that much.
Mhm.
It's not that complicated. And then they do things like they have these art classes where you got to take an art class or you got to take a language class. No, I don't. Why? I'm not saying if you want your kid to be as well-rounded as possible, yeah. Is it necessary to live in the United States to have a Spanish class or a French class? No. So it should be something that you want versus mandatory to get a credit. In other words, my point is, all kids are not academics. My son is hands-on,
Mhm.
so he needs courses that cater to him. When I went to Henry, they had auto mechanics courses. They had all other kind of things that you could do from one school to the next. I remember even having welding.
Mm-hmm.
Kids ain't got none of that.
That's right.
None of that. The last time I checked, when I had my business years ago, if you was a welder, you always had a job. If you were an electrician, you always got a job.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If you were HVAC, you always got a job.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
But these are not the job. These are not the careers they stare kids down. They want to tell somebody to take a typing course, or pottery course, or something that's really insignificant in real life.
Mm-hmm.
But when my son was younger and he was in wrestling, and we go out there in the suburbs an hour away, where these schools look like, a corporate office building,
Mm-hmm.
and I see financial, business finance or economics. You got science courses. You see all of the lab classroom and all of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
We don't have that where we're at. We don't have that. They want to give our kids all the insignificant courses,
Correct.
all of the cheap stuff. I don't need to learn Spanish in school. You can pick up Google and learn Spanish for free.
Mm-hmm.
For $20, you can learn Spanish at home faster than you can in
Yep.
class.
Yes.
That's true.
But yet they spend all of these hundreds of thousands of dollars for this teacher to come in and teach you something that you ain't gonna remember, and you ain't gonna use it.
Right.
Now I understand what they're saying is that there's a lot of Spanish people coming in this country. Good, then teach them Spanish. That's what I look at.
Uh-huh.
I mean, because I don't need it. Now if I go south of the border and I don't know no Spanish, then it's my fault.
Right.
You come here, it's your fault. That's why I look at it. So yeah, that's where I'm at with these schools. They're wasting our kids' time. They're throwing away money. They're trying to re-engineer the wheel when it comes to education, and these kids get stuck in the middle. So I'm totally against the Minneapolis curriculum, the way it's set up. It's useless, probably 50% of it. And the things that they need to do, they probably could save a lot more money. I mean, you could have a welding course. You could have, look, you could even do trading courses.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be that expensive to have a trading course. All you need is a computer and instructors, a couple instructors.
Mm-hmm.
And you can teach these kids in 1 year how to make money and learn how to take care of themselves for a lifetime.
Right, right.
But they don't give us that.
Mm-hmm.
They give us enough to get us down the road, just enough
Right.
to ask somebody else for a little more help.
That's
You know what I
correct.
mean? And that's insufficient.
That is
And we all
correct.
know that. And when it comes to the resource officers, yeah, they need to be there. When you got these things like guns and fentanyl in our schools,
Oh, correct.
you got this gang violence going on.
That's
You got
correct.
kids in there who they got parents trying to keep them on the narrow, and they can't because ain't nobody to be there to protect them.
Correct.
And if your kid is there at the school, if you got a weak-minded kid at the school, and it's a bunch of guys that's either forcing them or peer pressure, whether it's negative force or just peer pressure alone, then what do you think they're gonna do if ain't nobody to help
That's correct.
back them up?
That's right.
We need more than that. You know, this ain't Egan where you ain't got these gangs at.
Mm-hmm.
In Minneapolis, you got these gangs, and they come from in different cultures: Spanish,
correct.
Somali, black, and even white
Asian?
and Asian. So they need that protection. They need somebody to look to. You
Mhm.
can't look to the teacher
That's correct.
because these teachers are too scared to help.
That's right.
You know, they're too scared to help. I've had my son sit in the library at his school, period after period. I'm sure the librarian sees him, but nobody knows knows he's there. He's supposed to be in class.
Really?
But I waited for the school. I get the messages all the time. You know, your son missing this period. Okay, but he's at school because he gets dropped off. So it takes them 8. It took them. Well, I ain't gonna say 8. It takes them most of the school year, first, second, into the third trimester before they contact me by phone to have a meeting.
Oh. That's not good.
This
Not
is
good.
and this is our Minneapolis schools. They're letting these kids fail.
Yes.
So, but yeah, I got a lot of problems in Minneapolis.
Before we're going to take a break, but before we go, I have one question, and that has to do with COVID. How, because as you know, it was like at many tentacles, if you will, impacting people's lives by their health, people that ended up dying. And what I want to talk about, or what I want to hear from you, when COVID hit and we had to quarantine, that meant a lot of kids had to stay home. Many kids did not return to the schools. Many kids didn't have access to computers to be able to continue their education. A lot of kids lost several years. Some kids aren't even back in the school system because of COVID. Ryan, how did COVID affect you?
I watched a lot more TV. I watched a whole lot more TV. From the social aspect of it, there was no social life. I went to work. It was the essential worker. I think that's what it is. Yeah, essential worker. So I was still in the office.
Okay.
But it was going to work, coming right back home, going to the grocery store, masking up, having to do this ritual of washing hands, masking, coming home, going out. And it was definitely an experience. It took a toll on my social life. It took a toll on just every part of my life, totally. Because it was, I'm seeing people, but I can't interact with them.
Mm-hmm.
Having people be like, why are you so close? And you're like, well, I'm standing in line.
Right.
Or other people who didn't care about COVID. And they wanted to either
Right.
spread it or get it. And they're just like, okay, I'm doing my part. Please do yours.
Correct.
You know, and so it was just everywhere you go. It felt like a bumper car, kind of. You don't want to get hit, but you want to get hit, but you don't want to get hit. It was a real weird experience for me. It was a really eye-opening,
Mm-hmm.
but still strange because I've never gone through anything like that before.
Correct. Stacy.
I still remain social. My social group isn't very big to begin with, so we kind of kept our little group just to us, and we all hung out and going grocery shopping and all that. Of course, we put on the mask and you Purell everything and you wipe the cart down. I mean, you had a ritual of the things that you carried with you, you know. You got your own little cleaning kit with you.
Correct.
And I did all of that. I remember doing all that, and I was very concerned about getting it. And we had family members that did get sick, and that was something else, to say the least. I don't wish it on anybody. To get sick with COVID or to have a family member get sick, it was terrible. I don't wish it on anybody. But I think a lot of us, it taught us a lot about ourselves. I think a lot of us learned to live with ourselves. I mean, I think a lot of people didn't like what they seen from having to be alone with yourself. A lot of people started businesses. You know, you can see where we all went in this cocoon. Some came out butterflies, and some just came out.
Yes.
But you can see where, as society, we are truly social beings. Like, that really showed us how much we rely on one another and that social being, because at no point in time did you see so many people seeking therapy and coming out saying, oh, I need help, and I can't be by myself. And, you know, therapists went off, and everybody was trying to figure out, oh, I gotta go see this person, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. And everybody was online, Skyping, and, you know, because they want that connection, that social interaction. And so I think what we learned is that no man is an island, and that us being social beings, we claim that we want to be by ourselves, and really that's the last thing we want, because we were given the opportunity to isolate, and we almost went crazy trying to isolate to keep from getting sick. But at the same token, we're social beings.
Correct.
We want to socialize.
One of the things that I observed that had the most devastating thing, as you noticed, we had an increase in social violence in one form or another with COVID. Sexual assault spiked. Domestic violence spiked.
Yes.
Gun violence spiked. And I think part of it's because of what you were saying, Stacey, and that has to do with the fact that because we are social animals, because we need to be able to interact with other people, even though we need to do that, who are we bestowing our violence on but other people? But usually it's people that are residing in the same house with you. And that I found to be most devastating. I too, I lost a brother to COVID, and I remember very clearly I couldn't go to his funeral. You know, you couldn't go into the funeral home. And I know you both lost a parent who was stricken with COVID. My sister was stricken with COVID. I lost a niece who was 50 to COVID. She had other health concerns, but still in all, COVID impacted, the tentacles reached out in different forms or another. But Ron, speak to us a minute about how COVID impacted you and your household.
Well, it's me, like you say, I was having quite a bit of health issues, and I couldn't go to the doctor. And I felt like if I'm paying my premium, and they always want to do this visual thing, I don't want a visual. I want to come in, and the doctors and the nurses didn't want you to come in because of COVID, which I understood that. But I mean, it just affected me because I could not go to the doctor or make an appointment, and they always want to do a visual thing. But yet still they're going to charge you the same if you was coming
Correct.
in there.
That is correct.
And I didn't like that, and I called my insurance one time and told them, no, my doctor was online 5 minutes, and why should he be paid? So that's what affected me. And like everyone said, even going to church, you couldn't go to church, you couldn't go do
Correct.
this. There was certain things that you couldn't do
Correct.
because of COVID. So like you say, I just stayed at home. So, and like you say, you become lonely, and like you say, I had a couple of deaths in the family too because of COVID. And I felt like if these people hadn't went to the hospital, they would still be here today. But it's
Yes.
because of COVID. But that's what affected me and my family.
Sorry to hear that. Terry.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I don't think it affected me none during that time. I think just to piggyback on the social aspect of it, that you were talking about, I think that's one of the biggest things I got out of it, and I noticed, you know, you get to be more around your family, friends at that time. I didn't do a lot of hanging out, of course, because wasn't nobody hanging out, but I was hanging out at my house, you know. I had probably a little more glass of wine, had some fun, barbecue and things of that nature. And you talk to the people in your surrounding circles a lot more, maybe on the phone, watch more movies or things of that nature, figure out a hobby or something, get out in the garage, be working on the cars and stuff.
Correct.
So it didn't affect me like that. I'm a loner by nature. I keep to myself a lot, so it didn't bother me that much. The only thing that bothered me is the fact that every time I had to leave the house, I had to put a mask on. And I go to the grocery store and I gotta walk down one aisle to get to the next aisle. I didn't want to do all that, so I was a little bit of a rebel against all of that kind of stuff. And I didn't like none of that, but it was fine. You know, I dealt with it. I know my kids did not for school. When they went to the school, that was horrible. That was horrible. You might as well have closed school because didn't nobody learn nothing. Me trying to fight my son and get up and get on a computer and read everything, because when you go to school, you get your teacher tells you what's going on. They ask you these questions. Y'all talk about it. When you do online class, everything is on you.
Yes.
The onus is on you. And if your kid is not an academic type kid that's willing to get down in there and read everything, they're going to definitely fall by the wayside. So that's kind of what I experienced. That was just a real pain in the butt. Yeah, it was probably one of the worst things I think they did, is shutting everything down the way that they did.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break now and I'll come back in a few minutes, but give you a chance to stretch and think through some of the things that I'd like to hear from you. What is bearing most on your mind at this time? You know, when I reached out to you to talk about North Minneapolis, what was searing in your mind when you said, you know, this is what I'd like to talk about, North Minneapolis, positive or negative? So if you could think about that, and we'll come back in a few minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back. We're going to now talk about, I want to hear from everyone any issue that you had when you realized that you were going to be doing this program. What issues did you have that you wanted to speak about relative to North Minneapolis? We'll start with Ron.
My issue is keeping the streets clean. Seem like you go to the other neighborhoods and you see that their streets seem to be better than ours. I just have a problem in the fall. Seem like they come and do the leaves before the leaves fall. You know, but then you got, and people throw them in the street, then they're all winter.
Right.
You go out all winter to shovel, and then all these leaves is there. I just think the cleaning of the streets could be better than they are for North Minneapolis.
Very good. Stacy.
My biggest gripe is all this gentrification. I don't think they should have messed with Penn. I don't think they should have messed with 55. I
Right.
don't like, do not change the flow of our traffic. We live here. We know exactly how long it takes us to get from point A to point B. We are dropping off kids. We are going to and from work. We have schedules to keep. And to play around with this bus, that's part of our public transportation. I have no problem with it, but you've decided to put it so it's in the way. We got bump outs. We can't go around it. It is hard to turn off and on the streets, coming on and off of Penn because of these large bump outs. 55 has been restricted down to 2 lanes, and the lanes are extremely narrow, and even with the good weather, the lanes are narrow. What are we gonna do when the wintertime hits? When we get real snow, and those lanes are that narrow. That is my gripe with North Minneapolis currently.
And what's the reason? I want to know, why was this done? For what reason? I've heard different ones in there say to slow down the traffic
That's what I've
of
heard.
drugs, but to me, it's slowing everything down.
You know, you're right. It does slow everything down. But I'm gonna tell you like this: in 3 years, I've had 3 vehicles tore up. Prior to all of these changes with the streets,
Mm-hmm.
parked cars. Nobody's in them. Parked, completely parked. Demolished total because people are speeding.
Yes.
And ever since that, it has slowed down a lot. And it's still people running red lights all over the place. But yeah, I have to say, until you've been hit by one or have a few cars tore up and your insurance rate increase, I think you would might change your mind a little bit with slowing down a little bit, because people are just driving far too fast and incredibly reckless for no apparent reason.
Didn't you experience an accident on Dowling and Lindale where your car got?
It was actually Laurie in Fremont.
Oh.
A girl ran around in the left turn lane through the red light and T-boned me. In one of my favorite cars that I only drove a couple times a year.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, and she was just running the red light with about 4 or 5 kids in the car and no insurance. So yeah. Yep.
Ryan, what is your view?
Excuse me. The lack of community interest in the drug addiction and the gang violence before it became too late. It was, it became this huge, it's always been there, because I was part of it at one point in time. But it was never addressed. And now that there is new drugs on the scene, now we have to do something about it. Why wasn't it something being done back in the day?
You do work with folks that are having difficulties with drug addiction. What do you find is the most challenging, part for you in trying to help people resolve their issues, and B, what's the most difficult thing that they tell you, or perhaps there's more than one difficult thing that they struggle with drug addiction?
From what me and my team see, it is getting the want to stop using, housing, safe use supplies, getting the testing strips out there, letting people know that there are things you can do to cut down your risk of transmitted diseases while sharing needles, pipes, or even dying of an overdose. There are things you can do safe. It's harm reduction. So if you do certain things, test your drugs. So if it has fentanyl or xylazine in it, you know to do less. Not just going full out and doing the biggest you can do, but gradually work your way into it. Our main mission is to stop the overdose and stop the infections by providing people with clean needles, clean water, things that they can use, tools that they can use to safely use. If you don't want to quit now, then safely do it. It's like having a condom on when you're having sex. It's the same thing. It's doing things safer. You're not going to stop. We'll do it safer. Having naloxone, available. Having the resources for you if you do want to quit. Being able to break that barrier down to get into treatment, or to medication-assisted treatment. That would be Suboxone, or I can't think of the other one, but it will cut down your cravings and even help you stop using.
They have the phrase, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And I know back in the 80s when crack was introduced, we started realizing cycles. Do you think that, and this is for everybody, do you think that drugs contribute more to gun violence, or does gun violence contribute to more drugs? Ron?
Good question. I would think that drugs contribute more to gun violence, because I'm thinking people say they do things when they're on drugs that they would not do. Because sometimes when they go to court, they say, did I do that, or did I say that particular whatever had happened? But if they hadn't been on the drugs, this would not have happened.
Okay,
Even affect their children. So,
okay, thank you. Terry?
I agree. I would agree with what he just said. I think probably the drugs contribute to the gun violence for probably the same reason, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, like you say, you know, when people are using drugs, they tend to take bigger risk. Sometimes knowingly or unknowingly, depending on what they're using and how much. And because I don't think that if most people are in their right mind, they probably wouldn't use a gun in the first place. Most of the time, not all the time.
Okay. Stacy?
The drugs and the guns, I believe they go together, but we're missing the point. It is not the people that are using the guns that are the offenders of the gun violence. I believe the offenders of the gun violence is those that are dealing the drugs, because the user is a victim of the entire drug game. That person is a victim. They're a pawn, because they're being used, because the person that is supplying the drugs is they're selling and making this money. That's where the gun play comes in, because you're not going to steal my drugs. You're going to pay me my money, and you can't go to the police, so there is no other recourse but this use of violence. You're not going to sell on my block. Most users, they're going to pay up and go on about their business, unless they're going to use this gun to commit a crime to get more drugs. But I think we have more gun violence as a result of the buying and selling of drugs, dealer upon dealer, or someone trying to rob the dealer, than there is actually the drug user committing the offensive crime with the gun. I believe they're more apt to rob and steal. We'll see more petty crime than we will see a more actual serious violent crime. The serious violent crime is coming from those that are making the money, because now I'm protecting my block, I'm protecting my product. You know, all these different aspects that go into this drug dealing entity or whatever. That's where the crime comes from with the drugs and guns.
Yeah, I think he was referring to the actual seller being a user as well, right?
yes.
Yeah, because a lot of times it's the offender that's also on drugs as well.
Right.
Now, it used to be that the addict was an addict and the person selling the drugs was a different person, but now it's not really that case no more, especially now that you got marijuana being legalized, which is a whole nother problem that our government decided that was okay, and they all know that marijuana is a gateway drug to everything else, and you make it legal. Everybody's riding around high thinking it's cool. Somebody get on your nerves, somebody steals something from me, somebody flip you off, and now you're ready to pull out a gun to make yourself feel big or whatever.
Statistically, most people on marijuana are not apt to commit commit a robbery or a violent crime more if they would be on, say, cocaine or some type of opiate. You find more violence with that than you do people who are smoking marijuana.
No, that's true. I'm not arguing. I'm not trying to say you're wrong about that at all. But I'm just saying, at least from what I see, marijuana, although it's different from a heroin or something like that, with especially these kids, it's all very similar. It's all very similar in the sense that I'm talking about the bad actors. I'm not talking about the person who wants to have a little smoke and have some, to have a good time. But you got the bad actors who also use this stuff, and they're doing other things along with it.
Exactly.
And that's the one
Yes.
I'm putting. They're completely different
Okay.
because I'm not talking about this 5% over here, these bad actors versus 95% that just want to have a little fun and smoke. I'm not putting them together at all.
Okay.
But that's what I thought he was referring to.
Mm-hmm.
That's
As
what
we
I got
move
out of it.
forward, with our community, we have to be able to identify the issues that are causing certain portions of our city to erode. And there are those of us, that older generation, who aren't going to be around much longer, and we want to be able to reach back and hand that baton back, so that it's not to say, of course, that my dying tomorrow is not going to save North Minneapolis, but I want to be able to be a contributor to a part of the solution, and by doing that, to identify, because we all know that the city government is not necessarily going to come in and save our community. Too often than not, it's up to the residents to be able to look out for one another. The community block clubs that people get to, like you were saying, you know your neighbors, you know your neighbors' kids. And so, when you talk about takes a village, when I was growing up, if I did something wrong, it was like they had AT&T beat. Because by the time I got home, my mother already knew
Yes,
that I was
yes.
doing something wrong.
Right.
And so needless to say, having these extra eyes kept you from doing the things that you know you were going to get in trouble for.
Right.
And so that's why I was, I've been curious to know what do you think could contribute to salvaging the damaged parts? I'm not saying all North Minneapolis, but we have damaged areas and we have damaged people. What do you think could contribute? What baton would you pass on to someone else that says, we need to look at this to be able to save our community? Stacy.
I believe everything starts at home. I'm a firm believer. It all starts at home. As a mother, I'm the first teacher of my child. By the time they're 6 years old, that is who they are going to be. After that point, I'm doing nothing but molding and correcting. But that is who they are going to be. And so for me, if you want to work on the community, you want to build a better community, you start at home. You look in the mirror. You start with looking in the mirror. You want change? The change starts with you. And that's where I believe it begins.
Okay. Ryan.
I agree with what Stacy said. It does start at home. You learn everything by watching and listening to your parents. You try to emulate your parents at one point in time, because you look up, that's all you know in this world, until you're able to venture out further and further away from the house so you can become your own person. But at first glance, you see the actions of what your parents are doing.
Correct.
Yeah.
I agree. And our challenge, of course, is how we can break that cycle. Because if the parent is part of the negativity, somehow or another, we have to be able to reach that parent so that their children can be reprogrammed. Because if the child is being abused at home by the parent or the parent's significant other, they will emulate what they see. They become carbon copies of what they see. You hear about, what's most tragic to me, of course, is the small child who gets a hold of a gun and shoots themselves. And,
Yes.
I hear more people arguing for the reasons not to keep that gun locked up. Like I just read the other day about a challenge that a parent had by saying, if I was forced to lock up my gun, what am I supposed to do if a criminal breaks into my house? Tell them, hold up, I gotta go get my gun and out of the lockbox, and then I have to load it. As opposed to, you have a child that's been shot. But I digress. Terry, a question is for you as well.
Well, like Stacy said, I agree, it do start at home. It does start at home. That's the first place that a child's gonna be to learn the things that they need to learn, know the things that they need to know. With that being said, I like to piggyback off on that with community things. Kids need things to do. And if a kid can only go outside in the backyard and kick a few sticks around, you know,
Yes,
or I got neighbors with a yard that's barely big enough for the kids to run around in. You ever seen that commercial with the kid
yes.
in the swing and they
Hit
swing
the
from
other
one end of
fence,
the fence
yes.
to the next, literally? I mean, it's like when I grew up, the Boys and Girls Club was a thing.
Yes,
It's still there.
yes,
But you never think that our mayor or our city council thought to give them an influx of money to renovate that building properly.
correct.
At that time, when I was a teenager joining, we're losing the swimming pool. Believe it or not, there's a whole swimming pool down there in the bottom of that building
Yeah.
with a locker for boys and girls and everything. They used to have a wood shop. They used to have football, basketball, baseball. They had boxing. They had karate, weightlifting. They had, of course, the beginning of computer class at that time, things like that. They fed you and everything. The last I went through there, I don't know what you do to go on and probably just play basketball and bounce off the wall and run around and get in trouble, because nothing's changed. And if the Boys Club or the Minneapolis North Hospitality House or the South Hospitality House were in Chaska, we'd have had a $25 million building
That's
by
right.
now.
That's right.
Nobody says anything about those things. They give the YMCA some money, that's fine. But that's only because you see it. These other buildings are in the neighborhood. They're
That's right.
there.
That's right.
They're still there to this day. They're underfunded and underused. It used to be the place we went, and now it's just the place we go by. And it's dilapidated. Both of them are shame for Minneapolis to even have as a club. Neither one of them deserve to be in nobody's community. But yet still, they're still sitting there underused and underappreciated. And none of our city council, none of our mayors stepped up. They talk about equity, and you forgot those spots 30 years ago.
Ron,
That's what we need.
Well, I agree with what everyone has said. Like they said, it starts at home. Like when our age group grew up, we were children. We were not out partying with the parent. The parent wasn't partying with us.
correct.
The children had respect. We knew
right.
when grown people were talking, you go to the other room. If not, your parents would send you there.
Yes,
But nowadays, the parents and the children are out together, so they try to be buddies with each other. You
That's
can't
right.
do that. You have to be a parent. I tell my daughter that sometimes, and I see the way my granddaughter dresses, and I says, that's not appropriate. But my wife says, well, she calls me Shepherd. Well, look at her mom, and she's an example. But you know, you can't let your standards down as a parent. You have to be a parent, even though sometimes it hurts.
that's right.
You have to be the parent. And I agree with what else said. It comes from the home.
I agree. I agree. Unequivocally, yes, I do
Yeah.
agree. And I do agree that children will mimic what they see their parents
Exactly.
do. I am sometimes concerned, myself, I was concerned seeing children just barely able to read and write walking around with a cell phone.
Yes.
I had a problem with that because it was distracting in school. They were playing with the cell phone when they should have been listening to the lesson. But Terry, you brought up a very intriguing issue, and that has to do with what's available in our communities but being underutilized. And I believe that what might be worth looking into is to, I think people need to feel empowered in the community. If they live in an area around, we used to call it Tangletown, up around 25th and Irving, in the Boys Club.
Right.
And I think if people felt empowered to know, there's something we can do about it, and challenge the very people that want our vote to come out and address these things, tell us what's happening, in order to correct the issues that are correctable by the residents. I believe that this is what it's going to take. And as I mentioned to some of you before, we're going to start coming out in the community with our cameras. And we're going to start getting footage. And I'd like to hear from you and other representatives if they are interested. I'd like to hear from you about this, and point it out. This is our problem. Because this program is not just a information session. It's about being about correcting the issues that are prevalent, because we want to be able to take on the challenges of juvenile suicide, juvenile prostitution, drugs, gun violence, domestic violence, these social concerns that others are saying, well, it happens in North Minneapolis, and then they write it off and think that our community isn't worth the effort of improvement. And I'm here to say, you got it wrong. There are a lot of people here that think just like you guys, very much like you, and probably could get here and be just as passionate as you are, and we want to be able to reach them. We want to be able to hear from them. The Washington Toe Foundation is dedicated to improvement in our community, in our city, in our state. We want to be able to be making improvements nationwide. We don't want to just stop here at the curb. We want to tear that curb down and begin to repeat what we're doing, because by repeating, others will join in. And I've always maintained that if we all reached out with one hand and held on to our neighbor's hand, and we joined hands with the neighbor's hand, likewise, if we all reached out with that dollar, $1, hand passing it on, sharing it, we wouldn't need a lot of the programs that we aren't able to take advantage of anyway. And I think that it is a beginning, and I want to encourage you to join with us to correct these issues, because there should be consequences to people who are driving unlicensed and hitting other people. Those children could have been seriously injured. The people that are on drugs, they need to know there are programs. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want you to get well.
Right.
Because you can share with others how you got well. We want to empty the jails because it's a convenience for a lot of people, for black folks to be in prison. It's a convenience for a lot of major companies to have people in prison, because those people in prison are only making 2 cents on the hour? And they are creating the products that these companies are able to sell for several $100s, if not more. And so, we've got to teach people to stop imprisoning themselves by realizing that they have value. Because if you don't have value, a lot of kids realize that they aren't going to live past 20. Some of it is true.
Right.
We had interviewed a young man, or a young man's significant other, and her mother not long ago, as he was shot in the head, and he survived, and he's on his way to recovery. We want more of that. We don't need to go into nursing homes and see young men in these nursing homes paralyzed from a bullet. These young kids that are out there running around with other kids, once they go into these nursing homes, they don't have their buddies come to visit them. The only people that visit them are usually the nursing staff, and if they have time. Their families abandon them, their friends, their colleagues abandon them, and there they sit staring out the window, and they're 20 years old, and if they're lucky, they'll live to be 40. And if they're not so lucky, or maybe, let me put it this way, if they're lucky, they won't live to be 40. Because some of them want to give up on life because they never learned the value of their life. Therefore, to be placed in a nursing home, they can't reach down inside of them and say, I've got something to live for, because they went in with no value. They don't know how to grow value. And it's a conditioning. You know, you don't grow value. You're conditioned from the time you are small.
Right.
I love telling my grandkids all the time how much I love them. They need to hear that. They need to hear it all the time. I believe that very strongly. And I tell them, you probably get bored with me saying that, but it's too bad. I love you and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's what I believe, is that you reinforce those words of endearment. And those kids are looking at you like they don't know what you're talking about, because nobody told them that before. The image of grandma, as I say all the time, the image of grandma is slowly fading away. We don't have that image of grandma. I hear about Terry's grandmother and how she reached out and took care of everybody. She didn't have much, but what she had, she shared with everybody else. Stacy and Ryan's mother, her house it should have had a swinging door, because when she fed her kids, at lunchtime, there was a revolving door. Kids from all over. They may not have known her personally, but they knew that's where you can get some food.
Right.
And that, I believe, is a humble beginning for our kids, for these young kids, from the time that they're first born. Unfortunately, some of them are born crack addicted. And so it takes a while to get it out of their system. But we can't stop there. You know, there are many things that we can do to help improve our community. And I do hope that you will join with us in researching how we can improve. Researching, like Stacy loves to do historical, she delves into history a lot. These little kids, you know, we could do group readings where these kids can be brought together and taught things that the school system or the government, let me back off with, I'm not going to touch the schools, but the government is working very hard to eradicate the history of our people. They're working very hard at trying to deny what our children have to learn. And they need to hear it, because they need to know that if their forefathers could fight for their lives and those of their children, that it's worth getting up and hearing what others have to say about our history. And that's why we find it very important to want to do a comprehensive program about Minneapolis. We're going to delve into the great migration of blacks moving into the North Minneapolis area, a lot of times not because they wanted to, but because it was where we were placed. And we were placed there because we were the lowest on the rung next to Jewish people, and that was that pocket that we had to work with. And even then, our communities were redlined, which meant that in the deed to houses, in those deeds, there was language that said anybody other than white could not buy that property. So a lot of properties were redlined, particularly in the 55441 area. There is a company called CoreLogic, and what they did, they were hired by the city, more specifically Minneapolis Police, to identify, they did an analysis on properties that, we're going to take a break now for a minute, and we will come back, take about a 5-minute break. And we're going to come back because I want to touch briefly on CoreLogic and how it is impacting the finances of Minneapolis, specifically North Minneapolis. So let's take a 5-minute break. Yes, true story.
All right.
Interesting.
Do you have the actual map?
Oh, yeah.
Cause it's kind of color coded, right?
Guys,
Okay.
2 minute breaks.
Okay.
I think I've seen that before.
Oh, that felt good. Crack my back.
Have you seen that map before?
What is that clock
red
up
line?
there?
Where
Is
they
that
redlined the
the,
map over north or?
Nah.
don't do
I
that,
seen
Stacy.
it. They were on Channel 2 has a wonderful TPT has a wonderful video footage on YouTube. I think I picked it up on YouTube about the history of redlining and some of the black families that lived here in Minneapolis, their homes, their businesses, where they lived. One of the families that they talk about he was quite influential. He was a doctor. His wife was a doctor. They were very influential people. They met with the president and everything. And when they came here, they were basically ran up out their house. He had built the home that they had, and it was one of the first homes on this block, and they built the home that they had, and you know, them folks wasn't having it and basically ran them out of there. And there's similar stories in St. Paul about numerous families that were quite well off, and the history here is, read up on that, see that on Channel 2, that TPT, about the redlining here in Minneapolis. And when we were able to get our home in Brooklyn Park, my parents had to move all the way to Brooklyn Park because there was nothing else available. And we moved out there in 78. And so, just as recently as 78, we're still dealing with this redlining. Now remember, in 78, for us to move to where we were in Brooklyn Park, we were basically in no man's land. It was
Right.
nothing, you know what I'm saying?
We
Was like, it was
Okay.
considered no man's land. So look how far my parents had
Thank
to
you
push
for
out.
coming back. We're going to finish up now, and I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about CoreLogic, and very quickly to shutter this because I started it, so I wanted to. CoreLogic has a map of North Minneapolis that shows an enormous section of red from Golden Valley Road to the south.
Yeah.
And it spans the length of 7 neighborhoods. Near north, Willard Hay, Jordan, Hawthorne, Falwell, McKinley, and Camden. Nearly the entire northwest side of the city is saturated in red. CoreLogic said the red zone means the area has up to 5 times the national average for property and violent crime. The impact of that map may explain some of what is happening with the slow pace of economic recovery in North Minneapolis. There's a big red flag that says, don't go there, don't shop there, you're not going to make any money, you're going to get robbed, your insurance is going to go up through the roof. In 2020, more than $44 million were paid out in the 55441 zip code of North Minneapolis in claims. Green areas were considered the best for investment. In Minneapolis, those green areas tended to be neighborhoods with racially restricted covenants included in the home's deed. And I'm going to say that's probably around Victory Memorial Parkway,
Okay.
where you're going to see that. And the legacy of those maps used today can still be seen reflecting the distribution of socioeconomic status, race, home values, and home ownerships. So that's, just an overlay of what we have to struggle with, not only in dealing with the social issues and social concerns, but also in the background, you've got this redlining going on. But because in the interest of time, I'm going to, we aren't going to be able to, or let me say this, I want to give you an opportunity, I don't want to shut it off. I want to give each of you an opportunity to react to what I just shared with you and then we will close. Terry?
Well, I've actually heard about that. I was going to Summer Academy, and I believe he was the director at the time, was showing us the map of that redlining from a real estate point of view. So yeah, and I've heard it in like PBS programmings and probably like the North News or something like that. But I have heard of it. I've seen the maps. I believe it. I mean, I've been living over there most of my life, so I see it. And you can just tell by the homes in the neighborhoods where the lines are really drawn off at,
That's right.
or at least originated at, you know, like Penn and, you know, Penn, above Penn, you can tell by the homes are bigger,
Mm-hmm.
they're a little nicer, you know, different styles. You can tell that those were really affluent neighborhoods, at least middle-class neighborhoods at one time. They may not be today, but they were definitely at one time. And so, yeah, you can see it, and I definitely believe it, and I know it.
Ryan?
It's been a few years now. I've just learned about redlining. But when you tell people, a mass of people, to say, don't go to this area, you're cutting off money, don't live in this area, you are stopping people from building up the area. And that's essentially what that map says. It says, don't go here, don't do anything here in this area. What do you think is going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
People are going to find a way to get their needs met by any means necessary. That means drugs, crime, prostitution, robbery, and in the worst case, murder.
I agree, because it's very true. You covet what you see. Stacy?
What I see happening with them redlining an area and saying, don't go there, don't do this, don't do that, you're sucking the lifeline out of this. You're dropping the property value so low that people basically can't afford to live there. You're going to tax them at the same rate, but there's no income. The infrastructure is poor, so the crime is now there. So you're setting it up prime for investors, because now everybody's wanting to leave and push out at whatever they can. So now we have these investors that come and buy the homes at pennies on the dollar. They have the entire block, they bought it pennies on the dollar. They go through, they revamp it all, and that same home that they got it for $27,000 is now $450,000. And we just gave it away because they want to redline and say, well, don't go over there. Please, do not come over here then. Let us build our own community.
Mm-hmm. Ron?
I agree with everyone else said, and like Terrence said, I learned to the red line some years ago, and that was after I had bought my home. And like Stacy said, these people come and buy homes like my house next door to me. It went up for sale like a month ago, and we couldn't believe what the house went for. I mean, little or nothing. My wife says we could have bought it and rented it to our children and fixed it up, but we wasn't aware of it. Time the sign went up, the house was sold. You know, and my neighbor, she lived there, and she was on Section 8. She wasn't one of us, but she was very nice. She wasn't aware that it was going up for sale till a month prior, then they told her she had to move. So they kind of put her out. But then I noticed in my neighborhood, too, you see all these people walking around with their dogs, and they're not of us at all. It's more of them coming in with their dogs, walking around, and they're buying the houses that we should be buying
That's right.
for us. And they're coming and getting it. And I can understand, well, how can they get these houses and we're not aware of this? And all of a sudden, you look in the neighborhood, there's 4 or 5 of them moved in the neighborhood.
Correct.
Where are they coming from? You know? And they say, well, we're moving in because it's close to downtown, we can catch
That's
the
right.
bus.
That's
the,
right.
The stadium's down there and all this. Well, you didn't want to be here 10 years ago.
That's
Why
right.
are you coming back now?
That's
You
right.
know? So that's the way I see it.
I agree.
Where there's going to be some major changes in North Minneapolis.
Yeah.
With the amphitheater being, with them working on that amphitheater, I can literally see it from my house.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they do start, I'll be able to hear the concerts across the highway. It's right
Really?
there. It's literally one and a half blocks from me.
Where are they building it at?
Right off between Dowling and Lowry.
Oh, okay.
So if you notice when you drive down Dowling now going to the freeway, you can see the river now.
Yes.
They've already started taking all that stuff out
Yes.
of
Yeah.
there. Oh yeah, there's a bunch of dump trucks down there now. They haven't put that kind of money into that area like that for a reason, for no
Exactly.
reason.
No,
For-
that's
They
right.
definitely do it for me to go down there and watch Snoop Dogg, you know what I mean?
Right, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So here's my thing. I've always said this years ago, and I was probably ahead of my time because it took a while to get there. But I had seen this years ago, probably 15 years ago, and it started with the cars that you see coming through the neighborhood. It wasn't the people, it was the cars passing through. Now what you got here is the cars passing through. How many more BMWs and Mercedes-Benz,
Yes.
Lexus, high-end Toyota trucks do you see over north compared to 10, 15 years ago?
Exactly. Right,
Back then,
right. You're
those
right.
cars went over there.
You're right.
Now you, like you said, the dogs.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, you got people riding high with
Yes.
$3,000 bikes.
Mhm.
You got people jogging.
Yes.
You know, these are things that are just foreign to North Minneapolis. When I grew up there, you wasn't
Exactly.
jogging through North Minneapolis. You didn't want to drive down, and you get on the freeway past it. You know, now they're going right through. So it's just a matter of time.
It
you know,
is.
and you'll notice the biggest changes happens when a Starbucks pops up on Broadway. That's when That's when they're gonna get the green light.
Yeah, it
I
is.
mean, yeah. Right now, right now they ain't doing it right now because they got the riffraff to clear up, the bad actors really. But once you see the first Starbucks go up,
The
then you
game
know
over.
they got a plan. Their plan is on the way to doing other stuff. You see Chick-fil-A there, they the main. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying. I mean, because everybody don't eat McDonald's and Burger King.
Right,
you know?
right.
Yeah.
But that's all you got really over there.
We need equity within the home buying. We need people to be able to afford the home and then give them money to fix up the home. Give people a chance to actually live,
That's right.
Mhm.
and not just rent or
Right.
be on some sort of program. And that's what builds empowerment,
That's
which
exactly
would build
right.
pride, which
Right.
would build and keep building until someone
Exactly.
takes and says, okay, you cannot do this in my neighborhood.
That is
You
right.
cannot be here. We are a community.
Mhm.
When someone has
That's right.
pride,
That's
they
right.
take care of what they have.
It's a sense of belonging, though. You must feel
Yeah.
that you
There you
belong.
go.
That's right.
You
That's
must
right.
feel
Sense
like
of
you belong.
belonging.
Yeah.
My mother bought her home up on 43rd and Washburn in 1980. And the funeral home director, Malone's, remember they used to have a funeral home, he lived next door to her. And don't you know, he led a protest where they signed papers trying to get my mother out of the neighborhood, saying she was going to run it down.
Right.
Well, what she did was she put up cyclone fencing around her house and said, because all the rest of the block didn't have any fencing. She put hers up because she said, no, they're not going to run through my yard. And she stood her ground. She stayed there until and then of course, he wanted to come to apologize later on, and she's like, I don't have anything to say to you. But her home was one of the better looking homes
Yes, it
in the
was.
neighborhood.
Yes,
She
it
kept
was.
it up.
Yes, she did.
And until she had to go to nursing home, she stayed in that home. Nice English Tudor home. And like I said, it was 1980 where they were protesting. But in closing, if any of you would like to have a copy of the map, I'll be more than happy to supply you with that. And also, I want to thank you for coming tonight to talk to us. And this is just, I hope, one of many conversations that we will be having to talk more about North Minneapolis, because it's time we roll up our sleeves
Yes.
and do what we have to do to meet and greet, talk to other residents, do what we have to do in a friendly, peaceful manner to let people know we're here to revitalize North Minneapolis as it relates to our people. And thank you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for inviting
you.
us.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Take care.